Hello and welcome back to the new show, the new channel called One State, where there are discussions to do directly or indirectly with a one-state solution in that land, as you see in the logo, without giving it any names. There are people who live on this land and have been for many years. Well, these people, the idea is for all those people, for whatever ethnic origin they are, to get together and just have one country with equal rights and live together prosperly towards a better future together. And today our guest is Mr. Mazin. Hello there, and welcome to Mazin, and welcome to the show. Perhaps you could briefly introduce yourself and maybe explain to me, as an alien who's never heard about this region, what exactly is the problem here?
Yes, my name is Mazin Qumsiyeh. I'm professor at Bethlehem University, and I'm author of books like Sharing the Land of Canaan and Popular Resistance in Palestine. I've been involved in this struggle all my life, obviously, and my views regarding what's happening here is driven by my biologist background and my biodiversity and biology background, where medical genetics, where you need to identify the etiology of the problem before you offer any solution. So what's the underlying problem and where it originated? It originated in the late 19th century, formation of Zionism, and the idea of transforming a multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, and even multilingual society called Palestine, to make it a Jewish state, to gather people of Jewish religion from around the world and make it the Jewish state of Israel, a monolithic society. This is the idea of Zionism, and it's a colonial idea that involved removal of the local people, not just colonialism, but displacement, settler colonialism. That's why today there are 8 million Palestinian refugees or displaced people, and the rest of us live in shrinking cantons like where I'm speaking to you from, Bethlehem, Palestine.
Uh-huh. And how did they do it? How did they pull it off, the Zionists? Because let's face it, the local society, the natives, have been displaced. They have not been eliminated. So they still exist. They just moved. They were moved from the center of Israel to the outskirts and abroad. But they are still alive, very much alive. Although I'm an Israeli, I live in the center of Israel. My government or the society I live in prevents me from even being aware of what you said. It's almost been erased from history. Because if you drive from Tel Aviv to Haifa, to Ashkelon, to Ashdod, to Hadera, to Netanya, you will see an Israeli country with its Jewish people. You'll see Arabs as well, living in peace together. Of course, the Arabs in Israel are second-class citizens, but they are well behaved, and you don't really see any violence, on an ethnic basis, yes, and everything seems lovely. But it's not.
The same thing in any colonial society. In Australia, you also see some Aborigines still around, and they are even given the right to vote since the 1960s. And so the same thing with Native Americans and others. There has been an ongoing genocide of the indigenous people, not just ethnic cleansing. Over 250,000 Palestinians have been killed since 1948 or died because of Israeli policies. So it varies in country by country. Displacement, settler colonialism does not necessarily equate to genocide. There are other kinds of settler colonialism, for example, like the one that happened in Algeria and South Africa, that were not involving displacement and not involving even genocide, although in Algeria, 2 million Algerians died in the struggle, so you could call that genocide. So it varies from country to country, the level of the atrocities against the indigenous native people of the country. But basically, each country has unique features. In South Africa, for example, the white rulers wanted to keep black labor as indentured laborers, whereas the Zionist movement was not interested in keeping indentured Palestinian labor. Once they're able to wean themselves off of dependence on it, they remove them. And what's happening in the Gaza Strip now is the last phase of genocide of the Palestinians and ethnic cleansing. Israel intends to remove the population of the Gaza Strip. And this has been going on for the past few decades with blockades and starvation and denial of water and so on.
You know, you mentioned colonial. Yes, please, Walid.
Professor Qumsiyeh, there is a two-state solution. What's the difference? Why you are preferring the one-state solution?
Well, to my knowledge, there has never been such a thing as a two-state solution. There was a two-state delusion or illusion. Colonial, anti-colonial struggles never end in dividing the country between the colonizers and colonized. There are three possible outcomes, scenarios. There's a scenario of Algeria where 1 million French packed their bags and went to France. I don't say back to France because many of them were 6, 7, or 8 generations in Algeria. It was very traumatic, as I said, with a very high cost of both indigenous people and colonizer lives. That's one scenario. The second scenario is a genocide to a very large extent, like happened in the United States and so-called Australia, where 99% or so of the local people are massacred and few are remaining are manageable, so to speak. And the third scenario, which is the most common scenario found in more than 160 countries, is for the descendants of the colonizers and the descendants of the colonized to live together in one country after you shed the idea of colonization, after a decolonization process. This happened in all of South America, Central America, and Caribbean islands, North America, like Mexico and Canada, all of Europe essentially, all of Asia and many countries, also like New Zealand and South Africa and Zimbabwe, which used to be called Rhodesia.
Phenomenal. Can you please, I'd like to ask you, Mazin, to speak to the Israelis who have been heavily brainwashed, me being one of them, under the colonialist regime, to be afraid of a one-state solution. And an Israeli in the streets of Israel would not even consider doing that because they were led to believe that that's going to bring the destruction and annihilation of the Jewish people and the Jews and the Israelis. It will never work. The Arabs cannot be trusted. They hate the Jews. The Quran says that all the Jews should be killed and thrown to the sea. And Prophet Muhammad himself is a huge Jewish hater. And every Israeli possibly in a way believes that to a certain degree. And here you are in a naive way saying, oh, let's have one state. So convince me, sell me the idea, put my mind at rest that you won't kill me the following day and your friends, the other Arabs.
Well, I mean, I think part of this is, of course, this propaganda that's foisted on the colonizers. I wrote a book chapter about this mental colonization of the colonizers and another paper on mental colonization of the colonized people. This brainwashing, if you want to call it that, but it's really an understandable mechanism for the colonizers. In North America, for example, they used to say those savages are attacking us, we're circling the wagons, we're protecting us from those people who want to kill us. We don't even care why they want to kill us, they just want to kill us. Maybe it's a language problem, maybe it's a religion problem, whatever it is, but we don't care. But that's understandable. Again, logical. I'm not asking, saying good, bad, or evil. Colonization actually is part and parcel of the human mentality. We are now, after destroying planet Earth, we're talking about colonizing Mars. I just hope that there's no living forms on Mars that we will be displacing. But to more directly answer your question, I mean, all I would say is I urge you and all Israelis to read history critically, not from the very narrow perspective given by Zionists to us. Palestine has always been, as I said in the beginning, multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious, and even multilingual society. Before 1948, 44 languages were spoken in Palestine, including Hebrew. And I challenge anybody to show me any incident before the advent of Zionism in the early 20th century, late 19th century, early 20th century. Show me one incident where there was a struggle between, let's say, Jews and Muslims. My family, by the way, happens to be Christian, or for that matter, one struggle between Christians and Muslims in this country. And never been. The only problems come to us from outside. The Crusaders, for example, came from outside, from Europe, for internal political reasons in Europe. Tried to use Catholicism as a tool to use it to suppress the local people here and colonize the country. And that's why Jews, Christians, and Muslims who are indigenous fought against the Crusaders. Even Christians, my ancestors, fought against the Crusaders. The same thing with Zionism. Zionism is an idea that uses Judaism, that tries to use Judaism to justify the unjustifiable, which is removal of indigenous people from their land. And in this, people who are native indigenous people, for example, the Palestinian Jews, were against Zionism. And my grandfather's friend in school under the Ottoman Empire was Jewish, and my grandfather was Christian, were Muslims. They were living together in harmony. So this notion that we cannot live together is nonsense, and it's an idea that's created by Zionism to justify the unjustifiable.
But the Quran allegedly says, allegedly that behind every tree, a Jew will hide, and the Muslim has to stab him in the heart and drink his blood. Doesn't it say that in the Quran, allegedly?
I would be happy to discuss theology. I'm an amateur theologian. I like to study holy texts, and we can talk about what the Quran says. In some parts of it, it says Jews, Christians, and others who believe in God will go to heaven. There's no problems. In another part, it says something else. You find the same thing in the Old Testament and the Torah. You find contradictory sections. In one section, it talks about Joshua obliterating the Canaanites and causing a genocide, and that God told him so. And another part, it says that he was marrying Canaanites and living happily ever after with them. So you can pick and choose whatever you want from any religion to justify whatever you want to do for atrocities.
Mr. Professor Qumsiyeh, what's about the chosen people, the Jews?
The chosen people. God loves me more than you.
And that God promised the Jewish people the land.
Exactly.
What's your...
Yes, God, I know God. He's a real estate agent who sells land to whoever he wants to, and trades lands and gives other people's lands to other people. As I said, I don't want this discussion to be a theological discussion, because this would get very silly very quickly, because I can cite you verses from the Talmud about Christians, for example, that denigrate Christians, says Jesus will boil in excrement in eternity. I can cite you from the Quran. I can cite you from the Torah about what is this chosenness about. Many religious Jews actually reading the Torah, the same Torah as I read. Most Jews, originally Jews reading the Torah, said there's no such thing as return to the land before the Messiah comes. So Naturi Karta, for example, and other Orthodox Jews refused to recognize there's a Jewish state, and they refused the idea of a Jewish state. They said you're not even allowed to return from exile or diaspora or whatever you want to call it before the Messiah comes back. And since I believe the Messiah has not come back, this is forbidden and is considered an attack against the wishes of God for us to try to force military conquest of the so-called Holy Land, or as I like to call it, unholy land. So anyways, I mean, I'm not, I think it's futile to talk religion because everybody can use their religion for love. They can emphasize the golden rule of do unto others what you like done to you, or don't do to others what you don't like done to you. Or they can emphasize Amalek in the Old Testament, like Netanyahu says, go kill their men, women, and children, just like we did with Amalek. Don't leave even the beasts, the animals. Literally, the Israeli soldiers were shooting sheep in the street and shooting children in the head twice, playing games to shoot children. This is something that different people, and ironically, it turns out people like Netanyahu, who I think, who is like Herzl and Ben-Gurion, were atheists, don't believe in God. Ironically, they're the ones who use the verses from the Quran or the Bible or the Torah or whatever to justify what they do. Same as the Crusaders. Do you think the Crusaders were religious Christians? Believed in the message of Jesus, love your enemies and things like that? Of course not. So always the most sadist and crazy colonizers try to use religion. They fail at it eventually, of course, but they try to use it in a way to justify their actions.
I'd like to ask you about the forthcoming new one state to be established, God willing, soon. What 3 items would you insist, Mazin, that are included in the constitution of such a state?
First of all, it has to be secular. This is the most important thing. It cannot be based on religion. It cannot be an Islamic state or a Christian state or a Jewish state. We know this from history that such states do not work. They invariably become racist and discriminatory. So it has to be secular. Second thing, it has to recognize equality of all people, and freedom to practice your religion, but it's freedom based on practicing it between you and your God and your mosques and your synagogues and whatever, and not based on forcing people to believe as you do. There has to be freedom of speech. So number 1, secularism. Number 2, freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, freedom of, and this also, and equality. These are the 3 things.
What's Professor Qumsiyeh, what's about the return right for the Palestinians from
the refugees?
Refugees, yeah.
Yes, I mean, of course, also human rights. When I say equality, what does equality mean? Equality means that you cannot say Palestinian kicked out of his homes and lands cannot return because he's not Jewish. Mm-hmm. This is not an acceptable rule. Mm-hmm. No, they have to be allowed to return to their home and land, not to a homeland in parts of the West Bank that you create, that you have Ramallah as its capital or whatever. This is delusional, The refugees have an international right, a legal right, and a moral right, collectively and individually, to return to their homes and lands. This is well recognized globally and cannot be negotiated.
I'd like, again, if you could help me talk to the Israelis who I know are terrified of even contemplating such a solution, because they were led to believe that it won't work, and if it does work, it's going to work against them. So imagine a little boy. His mother is trying to take him to the doctor. So the boy is kicking and screaming and saying, I don't like doctors, I hate doctors, the doctor's going to kill me, he's going to eat me, he's going to cut me up. Don't take me to the doctor. And then the mother tries to pacify and explain and say, look, he's just a doctor, and he has sweets, and there's a chair there, you can sit on the chair, and he will say hello to you, and he will pet, he will speak to you very softly and nicely, and all he does is just going to check you, and he's going to touch you, and it's actually going to feel nice. It's not going to hurt you. You will like it. So again, let's say I will play the terrified Israeli, and I will say to you, okay, Mazin, fine, but what's going to happen? You're going to let the refugees come back. Then the Arabs are going to be a majority of the new country, and they are going to pass laws against the Jews, and the life of the Jews is going to be hell on earth, because the Jewish women will be made to wear burqas, and we are going to have to listen to the muazzin in our ear all day long, and you are going to pass other Islamic-related laws, and life in Israel for Jews will be hell on earth.
Very, very simply, I would tell you that these fears are stoked and encouraged and enlarged by people, elites who have an agenda. The agenda clearly is not working. The agenda is not providing. What did Zionism promise from its beginning? It promised safety for Jews, right? Promised that Jews will be safe in the land of Israel, the Jewish state. Well, show me where, other than this country, Jews are endangered for being Jews, for their Judaism, for their existence here, because they came as colonizers. People do not gain safety by oppressing other people. This is number one rule and logical indication of what happens. People are safe when they are not oppressors, when they are decent human beings who treat other human beings as equal. This is number one. Number two, in terms of coexistence, I would like to ask those people who say this, whether they say it naively or because they are brainwashed or because they are like Netanyahu, who know the facts, or Ben-Gvir or Smotrich, but say it with evil intentions, regardless of why they say it or the background of why they say such things. I would like to ask them where they come from and where they belong,
Oh, it's just people on the streets of Israel, many people.
In the U.S. Is Netanyahu telling me that U.S. Jews, Christians, and Muslims cannot get together, and as such, there are 6 million Jews in the United States? Should those 6 million Jews in the United States carve out New York and make it a Jewish state and kick everybody out, and then have a Muslim state, let's say in Michigan or wherever there's a lot of Muslims, because they cannot live together, because after all, they hate each other? The answer obviously would be no, and it's illogical and it's stupid to think like that, or France for that matter, or any other country, Australia or any other country. Now, they come to say, well, it's here. Well, why is it here a problem, whereas in America it's not a problem? Why is here a problem, whereas France is not a problem to have Muslims, to have Christians, to have others? The answer becomes very obvious. The answer is there's a conflict here that drives hatred. This is the third and most important point. The conflict drives hatred. What is the origin of the conflict? Again, as a biologist, I say, if I have cancer, I need to go to the doctor and tell him what my symptoms are so that he can make the right diagnosis. If he looks at my symptoms and says, well, you have headache, you have skin rash, and you have anemia. For the skin rash, I'll give you this cream. For the headache, this aspirin. And for the anemia, this eat some iron and spinach. He's not actually curing me, he's killing me. because he didn't identify the etiology of the problem. Etiology of a problem is a cancer, and you have to treat cancer. And here, the same thing. If you say, well, the problem is the hatred and the fact that they don't get along or they cannot live together, well, fine, but that's a symptom. And curing it, how do you cure it? Well, what is the answer of those colonizers? What is the answer even of the racist ones of them, Ben Gvir and Smotrich and Netanyahu and their followers? What's their answers to this quote-unquote hatred, fear of the other, whatever? What's the answer? And they don't have an answer because they're the ones who created it, you know. They're the ones who created this. Instead of working to solve it by justice and by human rights, instead of building walls and killing people and committing genocide and ecocide. Palestine, by the way, we need to talk also about that. There's an ecocide here. Palestine will not be livable for anybody here in a few years if we continue down this path. And I'm not sure it's going to last a few years.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, there's an ecocide in this country.
What's an ecocide?
Ecocide is destruction of our environment. Israel, for example, uprooted millions of indigenous trees, millions, over 12 million trees, both domesticated trees and wild trees, domesticated trees like olives and figs and almonds, and wild trees like oaks and hawthorn and carobs. And they planted a monoculture of pine trees around the country, which are susceptible to fires. You already see these fires even today as we speak, etc. This was devastating to the environment. Hundreds of species have disappeared already. Some went extinct completely. There's a destruction in terms of using weapons of mass destruction like white phosphorus and 2,000-pound bombs and things like that with depleted uranium. The aquifer, the coastal water aquifer is completely gone now, destroyed. I don't think it's recoverable because Israel even flooded the tunnels in Gaza with seawater, and so the aquifer is gone. Israel diverted the waters of the Jordan River basin. So Jordan River is no longer a river, it's a tiny stream. That was the richest biodiversity and agricultural area. It's now devastated. Desertification. Israel claims it made the desert bloom. I can show you by numbers and facts and figures that they actually created the desert out of the most fertile area on earth. This is, after all, part of the Fertile Crescent where humans first developed agriculture. So colonialism, like colonialism in Australia and the US, where 95% of virgin forests were gone thanks to colonialism, the same thing here. So I think you can see this happening, and I don't think this is a matter of Zionism winning and Palestinians losing. And hence, to go back to the issue of one democratic state, there are two paths going for us. Either this path that we have been trying to a genocidal and complete destruction where nobody is winning, this is a lose-lose scenario, or a scenario where we live together as fellow human beings. As Martin Luther King said, we either die together as fools or live together as fellow human beings. These are the two choices. There's no third choice, sorry to say. I say it also to Hamas people, I say it to everybody else, to the Zionists that arrested me, that have beaten me. I say to them, you know, you're delusional. There's no win here. You cannot win against the native 15 million Palestinians in the world. You're not going to win against us. You're not going to remove us. So you either live with us or we all die together in a nuclear war where the only winners will be cockroaches because they are resilient to nuclear radiation.
Wow. Okay. Yes, Walid, you want to ask a question?
Yeah. Mr. Qumsiyeh, in the 20th century and beginning of the 20th century, there is a Jewish question of the leader of the Jabotinsky and Herzl. They told, especially Jabotinsky, said that you can't concord or occupied and the indigenous people. All the time, the indigenous people will fight for you. And the Jewish Zionism looking for a safe country. Is now Israel a safe country, or is I think it's the dangerous state here all over the world?
Yeah, he mentioned it. Mazin
Yeah,
said earlier that it's the most dangerous place for Jews.
That it cannot bring safety to oppress another people.
yeah.
This is from a logical standpoint. And if you look at all key leaders of Israel, when they are in moments of truth to themselves and to the world, even Ben Gurion and Rabin have said it, that if they were Palestinians, they would resist, of course. So it is clear to them, it's understandable to them. Jabotinsky, I like him because he was kind of honest in his assessment, unlike Ben Gurion, who tried to hide his true assessment and speak diplomatically to the world. But in his diaries and his letters to his son, he was more honest and open about it, that there's no space in this country for both people. They have to go, etc. And that we have to always be fighting, that there's no rest for us because we cannot maintain a Jewish state in the middle of an Arab world except by arms and by bayonets and things like that. The problem with the quoting Jabotinsky and Ben Gurion and those people is God bless their souls, they are dead, and we cannot, and they lived in another era, you know. Their era was not the era that we see today, and Zionism didn't seem to have adapted or evolved. Zionism does not understand that conventional military cannot win wars, so to speak, and dictate to the others. Netanyahu still thinks delusionally that, like the Allies in the Second World War, he will win against Germany and Japan and then have a re-education program, blah, blah, blah. This is thinking like the Second World War. But even at the end of the Second World War, we saw the bring in of nuclear weapons. And clearly, by 1945, Einstein and others warned that the next global wars are not going to have winners and losers. They are going to have all losers. So it's not like before. So with all due respect to early commentators and Zionist leaders or Arab leaders for that matter, please rethink the views about conflicts. Now we have hypersonic missiles and satellite technologies that could obliterate whole cities with the push of a button. This is not something that you have what's called winners and losers in it. You have all losers.
Yes.
So again, I think that the sad thing about it is that the people like Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir and Smotrich are not the most educated, smartest people on earth. They are actually the least educated, worst knowledgeable of history and of the trends in the world. I think any scientist, any academician, any professor of history like Ilan Pape or Avi Shleim, Israelis or others, can tell you they really, you can look at the variables and you can construct a more rational decisions about things. And these people are not rational. They're leading us to a war in which, as I said, the only winners might be cockroaches.
Amazing. Can you please look into the future now in a creative manner with optimism. And can you, Mazin, please describe the stages of how do you see this happening? First, this is going to happen. Then after a while, we're going to have to do this and then transition into that stage. And eventually, it's going to lead to whatever permanent solution. And then you could describe how unique and beautiful and amazing and harmonious the new state is going to be compared to what it is now and compared to even other states of the world.
Yeah.
Well, as a scientist, I look at things objectively and given the variables. I am optimistic in the sense that I am hopeful, not in the sense that I am sure we will get there. Actually, if you ask me realistically, I would say the probability of getting there was 60-40. And on the wrong side, 60% is that we will have a global war with annihilation, and 40% that we will have that vision that you wanted to ask me about. And actually, after the murder of Haniya and in Beirut, attack of Israel in Beirut and Tehran, I would say it's probably now 70-30 probability.
Let's talk about the 30. Let's say it does happen.
Talk about the 30, yes. 30% probability that we humans will get our act together, realize that this is one tiny blue planet, that this notions of nation states was created in Europe by Europeans when the empires collapsed and they wanted to have a replacement system. And these concepts of nation states are harmful and lead to wars and lead to aggression and lead to racism and discrimination against minorities. Hence, you saw after the collapse of empires in Europe in the 19th century, increased in discrimination against Muslims, against Jews, against Gypsies, against Catholics in majority Protestant countries, or Protestants in majority Catholic countries, etc. So you can see that this system is not working. This system is collapsing. The system will not succeed. And Europe actually started rationally thinking of dismantling the system and creating the European Union to do away with this concept of nation states. I think that is part of that 30% future. So it has to be, we eliminate this European imposed system on us. We never had nation states in our region of the world, Western Asia or North Africa. We never had that before, and we should never have had it imposed on us by Sykes-Picot and others. And we should go back to a system whereby everybody is free to move anywhere they want to, travel anywhere they want to, local governance that respects, again, the vision that we talked about earlier, which is secular, freedom, democracy, human rights. This is essential. International law, by the way, was created supposedly to do that, supposedly. But clearly, Gaza Strip ghetto uprising, as I like to call it, showed that this system has utterly failed, that the system of human rights is no longer applicable when you have an ongoing genocide and countries around the world actually support it with weapons diplomatically and other ways, like the United States, Germany, France, Britain. It showed that the system is wrong and is not working. And the idea of a United Nations was flawed from the beginning, not only because of the UN Security Council and the veto power of 5 countries, the US being the primary one that uses a veto power to protect itself and protect its client state, Israel, but also because the whole concept of United Nations emphasizes nations, emphasizes that there is a nation called the nation of whatever, France, Germany, Belgium. This is division, perpetuation, while not working on solving the issues, which is human rights and justice. So again, we go back to a vision. A vision is very simple. We either live together, as I said, as Martin Luther King said, we either live together as fellow human beings or we die together as fools. There's no fourth choice. There's no third choice.
Wonderful.
Okay, I have another question.
Yes.
Please, can you tell us about the Berlin Declaration?
Berlin Declaration, please.
Yes,
Whatever that means.
About the one democratic state. And I think it's also Munich and Haifa Declaration.
Well, the question seems to have frozen Mazin. So unless he is unfrozen, we are going to have to end this here on this very positive note.
No, I have
Yes,
another.
but as you can see, he's stuck. He probably has a power failure or something. So we simply cannot continue, unfortunately. But it was really nice. I had a very good time talking to you guys. Thank you for joining. I wish you a pleasant day and a lovely weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you.